In the grim darkness of the far future, there are tombs that walk. Ancient warriors encased in adamantium and ceramite, preserved beyond death itself, waiting in darkness for the call to battle once more. These are the dreadnoughts of the Adeptus Astartes, and some have slumbered for millennia, their dreams filled with battles fought when the Imperium was young and their primarchs still walked among men. But what happens when the greenskin tide finds one of these sleeping giants? When orcs, those brutal, cunning, and utterly destructive Xenos, stumble upon a dreadnought that has been lost to time, buried beneath centuries of rubble, and forgotten by the very chapter that once revered it. The answer is a story of violence, dark comedy, and the terrible awakening of a warrior who has outlived everything he once knew. This is not a tale of glory. This is a story of what happens when the past refuses to stay buried, and when the galaxy's most enthusiastic looters find a prize beyond their wildest imaginings. 5,000 years is a long time, even for a space marine entombed in a walking sarcophagus. Wars have been fought and forgotten. Empires have risen and fallen. The very stars have shifted in their courses. And through it all, one warrior has slept in darkness, waiting for a call to arms that never came. Until now. Until the Orks arrived. The setting for our tale could be any one of 1,000 forgotten battlefields scattered across the Imperium. Let us imagine a world that was once called Talassar Prime, a hive world that fell to Xenos invasion during the Age of Apostasy, reclaimed at great cost during the Wars of Vindication, only to be abandoned when the forge complexes that had sustained it failed. The planet became a graveyard, its vast cities crumbling into dust, its billions of dead lying where they fell. Among the ruins, entombed deep within what was once the fortress monastery of the Celestial Lions chapter, lay a dreadnought. Not just any dreadnought, but a venerable, contemptor-pattern war machine, a relic of the Great Crusade itself. Inside this ancient shell rests Brother Captain Ethan, who last saw battle when the Emperor still walked among his people. Ethan remembers the Great Crusade. He remembers fighting alongside warriors whose names have become legend. He remembers when the galaxy seemed full of hope and possibility, before the heresy tore everything apart. 5,000 years ago, during the siege of Talassar Prime against a chaos incursion, his dreadnought's stasis systems activated automatically when catastrophic damage left him unable to continue fighting. The retreat order never reached him. The Tech Marines, who might have recovered him, died in the final evacuation. The chapter, devastated by losses, eventually withdrew from the sector entirely, and Ethan slept on, alone in the darkness, dreaming of battles that had become ancient history. The nature of the dreadnought. To understand what the Orks are about to encounter, we must first understand what a dreadnought truly is. These are not mere machines. They are not simple weapons of war, though they function as such on the battlefield. A dreadnought is a tomb, a prison, and a terrible form of salvation, all wrapped into one towering construct of blessed metal and humming machinery. When a space marine suffers wounds so catastrophic that even their enhanced physiology cannot save them, when their body is broken beyond all hope of recovery, the chapter faces a choice. They can grant their brother the mercy of a quick death, preserving his gene seed for the next generation. Or, if the warrior is deemed worthy enough, if his experience and tactical knowledge are considered too valuable to lose, they can offer him a different path. They can seal what remains of his shattered body within the armored sarcophagus of a dreadnought, preserving his consciousness and giving him the ability to fight on for centuries, even millennia, beyond his natural lifespan. The process is horrifying in its clinical precision. What little remains of the Space Marine's body is carefully extracted from his ruined power armor. Often, this consists of little more than a torso, some vital organs, and crucially, the brain. The body is suspended in amniotic fluids within an armored coffin, connected to life support systems that will keep the organic components alive indefinitely. Then comes the neural interface, the mind impulse unit, that links the warrior's consciousness directly to the Dreadnought's machine systems. This is not like piloting a vehicle. This is a complete sensory replacement. The Dreadnought's optical sensors become the warrior's eyes, seeing the world through targeting matrices and thermal imaging systems. Acoustic sensors replace ears, translating sound into data streams. The massive limbs of the Dreadnought, mounting weapons that could level buildings, become the warrior's arms. Every movement, every action, is filtered through layers of mechanical interface until the line between man and machine blurs into something neither fully human nor completely mechanical. A standard castroferrum pattern. Dreadnought stands roughly 12 to 15 feet tall, a towering construct of ceramite armor plates and adamantium skeletal structure. It moves with surprising agility for something so massive, powered by plasma reactors that provide nearly limitless energy. One arm typically mounts a close combat weapon, a massive power fist capable of crushing enemy vehicles, or a chain fist that can tear through the thickest armor. The other arm carries heavy, ranged weaponry, assault cannons that spit out hundreds of mass-reactive shells per minute, multi-melters that can reduce ceramite to slag, or twin-linked lascannons that punch through armor with beams of superheated light. But the Contemptor pattern is something else entirely. These are relics from the Great Crusade, designed when the Imperium still possessed technology that has since been lost to the ravages of time and the degradation of knowledge. A Contemptor stands taller and moves with even greater fluidity than its more common successor. Its systems are more advanced, incorporating atomantic shielding that can deflect energy weapons and even minor psychic attacks. The internal architecture is more sophisticated, providing better integration between the organic pilot and mechanical systems. When the Emperor still walked among humanity, when the Mechanicum still remembered how to truly innovate rather than simply maintain, they created these masterworks. The weapons a Contemptor can mount are equally impressive. Keres pattern assault cannons that are more powerful than anything available in the current age. Plasma blasters of compact design that would make a tech marine weep with envy. Graviton weapons whose principles are only partially understood by modern Imperial scientists. These are weapons from an age when humanity thought itself destined to conquer the galaxy, and they built their war machines accordingly. But perhaps the most important aspect of a Dreadnought is not its weapons or its armor, but the consciousness trapped within. These are space marines who have served for so long that their memories stretch back to eras that have become legend. A venerable Dreadnought might remember battles from the founding of their chapter. An ancient like Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves has fought beside Primarchs and spoken with the Emperor himself. These warriors are living history, repositories of tactical knowledge and strategic wisdom accumulated over centuries or even millennia of warfare. This is what makes their existence so tragic, because the human mind, even one enhanced by the gene seed of the Emperor's sons, was not meant to endure for such spans of time. The neural stress of maintaining constant interface with the Dreadnought systems is immense. It causes dyschronometria, a distortion of time perception where minutes might feel like hours or decades might pass like moments. Confusion becomes commonplace. Memories blur and fade. Some ancient Dreadnoughts can no longer remember their own names, knowing themselves only by the titles their chapters have given them. This is why, when not actively deployed for battle, Dreadnoughts are kept in stasis. Deep within every chapter's fortress monastery lie sacred halls where these ancient warriors sleep away the centuries, their consciousness suspended in a dreamless void. They are awakened only when the chapter faces its direst threats, or when the wisdom of the ancients is needed to guide strategy. Each awakening takes a toll. Each period of consciousness erodes a little more of what made them human. But they endure because duty demands it, because the Imperium requires their service, because to be a space marine is to know no fear, accept no defeat, and serve until the very end. Brother Captain Ethan knows all of this. Or rather, He knew it 5,000 years ago when they sealed him in his contemptor. How much he remembers now, after so long in the dark, after so many years without waking, is another question entirely. The stasis field that preserved him should have prevented any degradation of his consciousness. Should have. But 5 millennia is a very long time for systems designed during the Great Crusade to function without maintenance. And the galaxy is not kind to those who sleep unguarded. The long sleep and the weight of ages. 5,000 years. The number alone is difficult to comprehend. It is a span of time that dwarfs entire civilizations. 5,000 years ago in our own history, humanity was just beginning to develop writing, to build the first true cities, to discover the fundamental technologies that would eventually lead to agriculture and organized society. In the grim darkness of the far future, 5,000 years is equally transformative, though in different ways. When Ethon first entered stasis, the Imperium was still recovering from the age of apostasy. Goj Vandira's reign of madness had only recently ended, broken by the courage of Alicia Dominica and her sisters. The imperial cult was consolidating its power, transforming from one interpretation of the Emperor's divinity into the monolithic state religion it would become. Entire Space Marine chapters were being founded to rebuild the Adeptus Astartes after the losses suffered during the civil war that had consumed the Imperium's soul. That was the galaxy Ethon knew. A wounded Imperium, certainly, but one that still possessed knowledge and resources that would seem miraculous to the current age. The Mechanicus still maintained forge worlds that could produce contemptor-pattern dreadnoughts, still remembered at least some of the principles behind atomantic shielding and graviton manipulation. The Imperium's maps of the galaxy were more complete, its reach more extensive. There was a sense, however fragile, that humanity might yet reclaim its lost glory. Now, 5,000 years later, the galaxy is a vastly different place. The Imperium has endured, but endurance is not the same as thriving. Countless worlds have been lost to Xenos invasion, chaos corruption, or simple administrative oversight. The maps that guided fleet movements in Ethan's time are now riddled with errors and omissions, regions of space labeled as safe passage that have long since become death zones. Entire segmentums have been isolated by warp storms that rage for centuries. The technology that seemed commonplace when Ethan fell has become the stuff of myth and legend. The contemptor pattern itself is a perfect example. In the current age of the Imperium, these dreadnoughts are treasured relics, each one irreplaceable. The knowledge to construct new contemptors has been lost, surviving only in fragments of data that tech marines guard jealously. When a contemptor falls in battle, entire companies will fight to recover its shell, because they know that once destroyed, it can never be replaced. The fact that Ethan's contemptor still functions at all after 5,000 years of neglect is a testament to the quality of engineering that went into its construction. But what has this long sleep done to the warrior within? Dreadnoughts are meant to be awakened regularly, to maintain the connection between consciousness and machine, to prevent the drift that occurs when a mind exists in isolation for too long. The recommended interval is no more than a century between awakenings. Ethan has slept for 50 times that long. His mind, preserved in amber like some ancient insect, has known only darkness and silence, and the ghost-thin dreams that sometimes penetrate stasis fields. What does someone dream about for 5,000 years? What thoughts circle through a consciousness that exists in suspended animation, aware on some level, but unable to act, unable to wake, unable to even mark the passage of time? The human mind is not designed for such isolation. Even a space marine, gene-forged for resilience, modified to endure conditions that would break a normal human, has limits. And Ethan has been pushed far beyond those limits. There is also the question of physical degradation. The amniotic fluids that preserve his organic remains should be regularly filtered and renewed. The neural interface connections should be checked and maintained. The life support systems that keep his brain oxygenated and his remaining organs functional should be serviced according to strict schedules laid down by the Mechanicus. None of this has happened. For 50 centuries, Ethan has existed in a closed system, sustained only by the robust engineering of a lost age and perhaps the mercy of the machine, God itself. Yet he endures. The monitoring systems that still function within his sarcophagus show life signs, faint but steady. The reactor that powers his Dreadnought continues its slow fusion reaction, producing energy that cycles through ancient capacitors and feeds into systems that have not moved in millennia. The weapons that arm his chassis remain charged and ready, their machine spirits patient and faithful. Somewhere deep in the ruins of what was once the Celestial Lion's Fortress Monastery, in a vault that has become buried under rubble and time, this ancient warrior waits. The fortress monastery itself has not fared well. The upper levels collapsed during the final assault that drove the Chaos forces from Talassar Prime. Orbital bombardment, necessary to cleanse areas of demonic corruption, brought down entire spires. The evacuation was rushed, desperate, conducted while enemy forces still held parts of the complex. In the confusion, in the desperate fight for survival, the deeper vaults were forgotten. Records were lost. The tech marines who knew the full layout of the fortress died in the fighting. And when the Celestial Lions withdrew to rebuild, they left behind more than just a facility. They left behind one of their own. The planet itself became a dead world, its atmosphere poisoned by the weapons used to cleanse it, its cities empty shells, populated only by the ghosts of billions. For millennia, it remained untouched, a monument to a battle so desperate that even the victors chose to forget it existed. The warp routes that once connected Talassar Prime to the wider Imperium shifted, making the journey there difficult and unrewarding. Pirates occasionally used the ruins as a temporary base, but never stayed long. The world had an aura of death about it that even the most hardened criminals found unsettling. But the galaxy is a vast place, and nothing remains hidden forever. Ork spores, those remarkable reproductive mechanisms that ensure the greenskin menace spreads wherever orcs fight and die, can survive in almost any environment. They drift through space on solar winds. They hide in the hulls of spacecraft. They lay dormant in the soil for decades before germinating. And several centuries ago, during a brief orc incursion into the system that was quickly repelled, enough spores fell on Talassar Prime to begin the cycle anew. Slowly, patiently, the orcoid ecosystem established itself. Squids appeared first, feeding on fungus that grew in the ruins. Then snotlings, tending their fungus farms in the darkness. Gretchen followed, building crude settlements and fighting amongst themselves. And finally, the orcs themselves began to emerge, small at first, but growing larger with each generation as they fought and established dominance hierarchies. After a few centuries, Talassar Prime had a thriving orc population, unnoticed by the Imperium, growing in numbers and sophistication. They called themselves the Rusty Cog Tribe, taking their name from an ancient piece of machinery they'd found and erected as a tribal totem. They were primarily a Blood Axes clan, unusually cunning for orcs, with a tendency toward looting and scavenging rather than pure frontal assault. This made them perfect candidates for exploring the vast ruins that covered their world, delving into collapsed structures in search of technology they could strip and repurpose. And one day, following a tunnel that descended deeper than any had gone before, a mob of orc looters found something that would change everything. A vault, still sealed, its blast doors intact despite the millennia. And behind those doors, a prize that would drive the entire tribe into a frenzy of excitement and greed. They had found a space marine Dreadnought. Understanding the greenskin mind. To understand what happens next, we must understand the orcs themselves. They are not simply brutal and stupid, though they certainly embrace both brutality and a certain cheerful disregard for complex planning. Orcs are one of the most successful species in the galaxy, precisely because they are far more sophisticated than they appear. They are living weapons, designed by the ancient Old Ones during the War in Heaven to fight against the Necrons and other horrors of that long-ago conflict. And like all good weapons, they are designed to be self-sustaining, adaptable, and extremely difficult to eliminate. The Orkoid species exists in a symbiotic relationship with fungal organisms at the cellular level. An orc is simultaneously animal and fungus, flesh and spore. This gives them remarkable resilience. They can survive injuries that would kill almost any other species. They regenerate damage at astonishing rates. And perhaps most importantly, they reproduce through spore release. Every orc constantly sheds spores throughout its life, and when an orc dies, it releases millions more. These spores can survive almost anything, from hard vacuum to extreme heat, waiting patiently for conditions favorable to germination. This means that wherever orcs fight, more orcs will follow. You cannot simply kill all the orcs on a planet and declare it cleansed. The spores remain, working their way through soil and water, eventually producing new squigs, new Gretchen, new orcs. The only way to truly eliminate an orc infestation is total planetary sterilization through exterminatus, burning everything down to the bedrock. Anything less, and they will return. But physical resilience is only part of what makes orcs so dangerous. They also possess a form of collective psychic power that manifests as the WAG. This gestalt field is generated by all orcs, growing stronger as more greenskins gather together. It serves multiple functions. First, it allows orcs to instinctively recognize which among them is bigger and therefore in charge. Orc society is based entirely on might makes right, and the WAG field provides an unconscious method of establishing and maintaining hierarchy. Second, and more remarkably, the WAG appears to have reality-bending properties. Orcs believe that red things go faster, and so, when enough orcs believe this together, their vehicles painted red actually do move faster than identical vehicles in other colors. They believe that if you put enough dakka on something, it will shoot good, and so their ramshackle weapons that should barely function manage to fire reliably. They believe that the biggest orc is the best fighter, and so their war bosses genuinely do become nearly unstoppable in combat. This is not simply superstition. Imperial tech priests have documented cases of orc weapons that refuse to function when wielded by non-orcs, despite being mechanically sound. They have observed orc vehicles that should not be able to move under the laws of physics managing to operate anyway. The prevailing theory is that the WAG field provides a sort of quantum probability manipulation, making unlikely things become likely when enough orcs believe they should. It is unconscious, instinctive, and absolutely fundamental to orc technology and society. This brings us to the odd boys, orcs who are born with specialized genetic knowledge hardwired into their brains. Mech boys are born knowing how to build and maintain orc technology. They do not learn these skills through study or practice. The knowledge simply exists within them, an inheritance from the Old Ones, who designed their species millions of years ago. A mech boy looks at a pile of scrap and instinctively knows what can be built from it, how pieces should fit together, what will work and what will not. Similarly, pain boys are born with understanding of orc anatomy and medicine. They know how to graft cybernetic enhancements, how to stitch wounded boys back together, how to create the combat drugs that orcs dose themselves with before battle. Weird boys are psychic sponges, absorbing and channeling the WAG energy that surrounds them. When enough orcs gather and their psychic field intensifies, weird boys can unleash devastating psychic attacks, calling down the foot of Gork or Mork to crush enemies, or opening portals to teleport orc mobs across the battlefield. But for our purposes, the most important odd boys are the mech boys. These are the orcs who will examine the Dreadnought and determine what should be done with it. And their approach to technology is fundamentally different from that of any other species in the galaxy. Orcs do not research. They do not experiment in any systematic way. They do not carefully document their findings or build upon the knowledge of previous generations. Instead, they loot, they scavenge. They take what others have built and bash it into a form that pleases them, welding spiky bits onto smooth surfaces, painting everything in garish colors, and adding more guns because you can never have enough Dakar. The fact that this produces functional technology is partly due to their innate odd boy knowledge, and partly due to the WAG field making up for the gaps in their engineering. Orc looting culture is all-consuming. Nothing is sacred. Nothing is off-limits. They will loot enemy weapons and armor. They will loot vehicles, from simple trucks to Imperial super-heavy tanks. They will loot buildings, food, fuel, ammunition, even other Orcs' possessions if they think they can get away with it. The Death Skulls clan has elevated looting to a cultural identity, believing that everything blue is lucky, and that the more they loot, the luckier they become. Their warriors go into battle painted blue, carrying looted weapons, riding in looted vehicles, convinced that their thieving ways are blessed by Gork and Mork themselves. When Orcs find something particularly impressive, something that speaks to their love of violence and destruction, they become almost obsessive about claiming it. A Space Marine Dreadnought would qualify as perhaps the ultimate loot. It is huge, bristling with weapons, made of the finest armor in the Imperium, and carries the reputation of being nearly impossible to kill. For an Orc, especially a mech boy, finding a Dreadnought would be like a human child finding a room full of toys. The Pyeongseong, possibilities for looting, modification, and general mayhem would seem endless. But there is another aspect to Orc psychology that matters here. Orcs genuinely do not understand fear the way other species do. They comprehend danger in an abstract sense. They know that some things are more likely to kill them than others, but they do not experience the existential dread that grips other species when facing overwhelming odds. Instead, they feel excitement. The bigger the threat, the better the fight, and the more glorious the potential victory. This is why Orcs will charge headlong into situations that any rational being would flee from. It is not bravery, precisely, because bravery implies overcoming fear. Orcs simply do not have that fear to overcome. They see a battle, any battle, as an opportunity for fun. They see danger as challenge to be met with enthusiasm. And they see death, when it comes, as just one of those things that happens sometimes. Other Orcs will loot their body and carry on. So when the looters of the Rusty Cog tribe breach the vault and find Ethan's Dreadnought standing silent in the darkness, they do not feel afraid. They do not recognize the ancient warrior for what he is, a vengeful angel of death waiting to be awakened. They see only the most magnificent piece of loot they have ever encountered, and they want it. The culture of looting and the mech boys' art. The Orcs of the Rusty Cog tribe are experienced looters. They have been scavenging the ruins of Talassar Prime for generations, pulling ancient technology from collapsed buildings, stripping components from long-dead vehicles, hoarding anything that looks even remotely useful. Their settlement, built in what was once a manufactorum complex, is a ramshackle mess of looted structures held together with rusty bolts and welded plates. Gretchen slaves scurry through the warren of corridors, carrying scrap to the workshops where mech boys hammer away at their latest projects. The war boss of the Rusty Cog tribe is called Scrubnuts, a particularly large and scarred orc who earned his position by defeating the previous war boss in single combat, and then, in a display of cunning unusual even for a Blood Axe's orc, immediately promoting all the old war boss's rivals to positions of authority in his new regime. This prevented the usual period of internal fighting that follows a leadership change, and allowed Scrubnuts to maintain a larger and more cohesive tribe than would normally be possible. Under Scrubnuts' leadership, the Rusty Cog tribe has thrived. They have established dominance over the other orc mobs on Talassar Prime, forcing them to either join the tribe or flee to the wilderness. They have accumulated vast stockpiles of looted technology. and they have been conducting increasingly bold exploration missions into the deepest parts of the ruins, seeking the biggest and best salvage. The looter mob that finds Ethan's vault is led by a knob called Gearskull, so named for the elaborate metal plate that covers half his skull after an unpleasant encounter with a collapsing ceiling. Gearskull fancies himself something of a treasure hunter, though his methods involve less archaeology and more smash everything until something valuable falls out. He has 30 boys under his command, along with twice that many Gretchen, to carry loot and perform the dangerous work of crawling into collapsed tunnels. They have been working this particular ruin for weeks, following ancient power conduits deeper and deeper into what they correctly identified as an important structure. The fortress monastery of the Celestial Lions was built to withstand siege warfare, with vaults and bunkers extending hundreds of meters below the surface. Most of these have collapsed or flooded over the millennia, but Gearskull's mob has been persistent, bypassing obstacles and forging new tunnels where necessary. When they finally break through into the vault where Ethan rests, the Orks stop and stare. Even by Ork standards, this is impressive. The chamber is enormous, carved from solid bedrock and reinforced with adamantium supports that run floor to ceiling like the ribs of some great beast. Emergency lighting still functions after all these centuries, powered by some deep and patient source, bathing the chamber in a dim red glow that makes shadows dance across the walls. The vault itself shows signs of the ancient battle that raged above it. Cracks spiderweb across portions of the ceiling where orbital bombardment stress reached even these depths. Scorch marks, faded but still visible, speak of weapons fire that penetrated this far during the final desperate hours of the siege. And in the center of the chamber, locked in place by stasis clamps that haven't moved in 5,000 years, stands the Contemptor. It is magnificent. Adamantium and ceramite plates cover its frame, each one bearing the heraldry of the Celestial Lions. The golden lions on their azure field have faded over the millennia, tarnished and dulled by time and the thin patina of dust that covers everything in the chamber, but still visible to anyone who knows what to look for. The azure background has darkened almost to black in places, but the craftsmanship that went into the heraldry's application remains evident even after such vast spans of time. The Dreadnought's right arm mounts a Keres pattern assault cannon, its 6 rotating barrels dark and silent. Even inactive, the weapon radiates menace. Each barrel is easily as thick as an Ork's arm, and the ammunition feed system that snakes from the weapon back into the Dreadnought's torso suggests a capacity for sustained firepower that makes even the trigger-happy Orks pause in appreciation. The left arm bears a massive power fist, currently deactivated, but still radiating a sense of potential violence. The fingers, each one large enough to crush an Ork skull, are locked in a half-closed position, frozen mid-grasp as they have been for millennia. Embedded in the wrist assembly is a storm bolter, its twin barrels visible among the mechanical workings, and beneath that, the nozzle of a heavy flamer, dark with ancient Prometheum residue. Purity seals and oath papers cover the chassis, layered one atop another in some places, scattered individually in others. Some are so old they have crumbled to dust at the slightest air current from the Orks' breathing, their words lost to time forever. Others remain intact, their vellum yellowed and brittle but readable, their high Gothic scripts promising vengeance upon the Emperor's enemies in flowing calligraphy that speaks of a more hopeful age. One seal, positioned prominently on the Dreadnought's chestplate, bears the personal sigil of a tech marine whose name has been worn away but whose devotion remains evident in the elaborate illumination surrounding the text. The Dreadnought stands 12 feet tall, even in its dormant state. Its optical sensors are dark, lifeless, like the eyes of a statue. No sound comes from within its armored shell, no hint of the consciousness that lies preserved within. The stasis field that has preserved it for so long has only recently failed, its generators finally exhausted, after millennia of continuous operation. The field's collapse is recent enough that frost still covers portions of the Dreadnought's surface, sublimating slowly in the vault's atmosphere and creating faint wisps of vapor that curl around the ancient war machine like funeral shrouds. The Dreadnought is technically active now, its reactor ticking over at idle speed, its systems on minimal power in standby mode. Indicator lights, barely visible in the dim red emergency illumination, blink slowly on various panels. System monitoring continues automatically, patient and faithful, waiting for the activation codes that will bring the war machine to full readiness. But with no tech marines to provide those codes, no chapter serfs to perform the rituals of awakening, the Dreadnought simply stands and waits as it has waited for 5,000 years, a silent sentinel in a forgotten tomb. To Gearskull and his boys, this is the ultimate treasure. They immediately begin arguing about who gets to claim it, with several boys suggesting they should just start shooting each other to establish dominance. Gearskull, demonstrating the cunning that makes him a respected leader among the Rusty Cog tribe, settles the argument by declaring that the Dreadnought belongs to the whole mob and that they will take it back to the settlement to show war boss Scrubnuts. This satisfies the boys, who immediately begin trying to figure out how to move something that weighs several tons and is locked in place by massive clamps. The Gretchen are sent to fetch tools and equipment. The boys examine the stasis clamps, trying to understand how they work. One particularly enthusiastic Ork tries to simply shove the Dreadnought, with predictable results. It does not budge. This only increases their admiration for it. Anything that heavy must be really good for stomping enemies. After several hours of work, including one incident where a Gretchen accidentally triggers an ancient defense turret that wounds 2 boys before being destroyed, they manage to release the stasis clamps. The Dreadnought shifts slightly, settling into a more natural standing position, but otherwise remains inactive. The Orks rig up a system of pulleys and supports, planning to drag the Dreadnought back through the tunnels they have excavated. It takes 2 days of constant work, with the Gretchen doing most of the actual labor, while the boys supervise and occasionally hit things with hammers. When they finally emerge from the ruins, dragging their prize, the rest of the Rusty Cog tribe erupts in excitement. Orks pour out of the settlement to see what Gearskull's mob has found. The shouting and bellowing can be heard for miles. Several fights break out as Orks argue about what should be done with the Dreadnought. War boss Scrubnuts has to personally crack a few skulls to restore order. The Dreadnought is brought to the largest workshop in the settlement, a vast space where the tribe's mech boys conduct their most ambitious projects. The Big Mech, an ancient and scarred Ork called Rustgut Spanner's Masher, takes one look at the Dreadnought and declares it to be the finest piece of loot he has ever seen. He immediately begins planning what modifications will be necessary to make it properly Orky. Rustgut is old by Ork standards, having survived countless battles and accumulated enough cunning and mechanical knowledge to make him invaluable to the tribe. He has built everything from crude wagons to elaborate stompers, and he has an instinctive understanding of how technology works that borders on supernatural. When he looks at the Dreadnought, he sees possibilities. He sees a walking weapons platform that could be enhanced with more guns, more armor, more spiky bits. He sees something that, with proper Orky modification, could become a terror on the battlefield. But first, he needs to understand what he is working with, and that means taking the Dreadnought apart. The Mech Boys' investigation. Rustgut Spanner's Masher approaches the Dreadnought with the careful reverence of an Ork, examining something he plans to thoroughly disassemble. He walks around it several times, running his hands over the ceramite plates, tapping the armor with a wrench to listen to the sound it makes. Other Mech Boys gather around, offering suggestions and arguing about what should be done first. The first order of business is removing the external armor plates to see what lies beneath. This proves more difficult than expected. The ceramite is bonded to the underlying structure with molecular precision, and the Ork's usual method of hit it with a hammer until it comes loose. is not effective. Several boys try using cutting torches, but the armor resists even sustained plasma cutting. Eventually, Rustgut finds the maintenance access points, hidden beneath purity seals and covered by decorative armor panels. These were designed to allow tech marines to perform repairs and maintenance, and they open much more easily. As the mech boys begin their examination, they discover layer upon layer of sophisticated technology. The reactor that powers the Dreadnought is like nothing they have seen before, a compact fusion core that produces phenomenal amounts of energy with minimal fuel consumption. The servos and actuators that move the massive limbs are made from alloys the Orks cannot identify, far stronger and lighter than anything they normally work with. The weapon systems are equally impressive, with targeting computers and fire control systems that would put most Imperial Guard vehicles to shame. But what really captures their attention is the sarcophagus. When they finally access the central chamber, they find the armored coffin that contains Ethon's remains. It is covered in Imperial iconography, sealed with purity seals and warded against corruption. The Orks, of course, do not understand or care about any of this. They see only an interesting box that is very securely locked. Opening the sarcophagus becomes an obsession for Rustgut. He spends days trying to bypass the locks without damaging the systems connected to it. The sarcophagus is designed to be tamper-proof, with multiple redundant security measures. Any attempt to force it open will trigger automatic defenses. The Orks discover this the hard way when one enterprising mechboy tries to cut through a seal and receives a powerful electric shock that sends him flying across the workshop. During this investigation, something begins to happen inside the Dreadnought. The extended period of handling, the removal of armor plates, the poking and prodding of systems that have been dormant for millennia, all of this is feeding power into circuits that have been inactive. The reactor, responding to increased demand, begins to spin up from its idle state. Monitoring systems come online, diagnostic routines start running, and deep within the sarcophagus, suspended in amniotic fluid that has slowly become cloudy over the centuries, something stirs. Ethan is beginning to wake up. The process is gradual, like surfacing from a very deep dive. His first sensation is pain, sharp and all-encompassing. His body, what little remains of it, has been motionless for 5,000 years. Muscles that still exist have atrophied. Nerve endings that connect to the neural interface have been dormant so long they protest when forced to transmit signals again. His brain, preserved but not entirely unchanged by the long sleep, struggles to process sensory input. His second sensation is confusion. Where is he? What is happening? The last thing he remembers is the siege of Talassar Prime, the Chaos forces breaking through the defenses, the order to retreat, fighting a desperate rearguard action to buy time for his brothers to evacuate, taking catastrophic damage that forced his Dreadnought into emergency stasis. And then, nothing. Darkness. Silence. The void. How long has it been? The chronometer displays in his optical systems are not functioning properly, showing nonsensical timestamps that cannot possibly be correct. 5,000 years. That cannot be right. That would mean... His thoughts are slow, sluggish, like moving through thick mud. His processors, the electronic systems that augment his cognitive functions, are running diagnostic checks and finding errors. Many errors. Too many errors. Gradually, he becomes aware of external sensors. His optical systems are registering movement, shapes, heat signatures. But the images make no sense. He sees green-skinned creatures swarming around his chassis. He sees crude tools and ramshackle equipment. He sees what appears to be the interior of some kind of workshop, but not one built to Imperial standards. The architecture is wrong. The technology is primitive. And those creatures are those Orks. The thought triggers something deep in his conditioning. Orks. Xenos. Enemies of the Imperium. The response is automatic. hardwired into his very being by decades of training that predated his internment in the Dreadnought. Orks must be destroyed. Orks must be purged. The Emperor demands it, but he cannot move. His motor systems are not responding. He tries to activate his weapons, to bring his assault cannon to bear on the greenskin filth that dares to touch him, but nothing happens. The weapons are offline, their machine spirits dormant. He tries to access the Dreadnought's Vox system, to call out to his brothers, to demand support, but the transmitter is dead. He is trapped in his own body, conscious, but helpless, able to see and hear, but unable to act. The frustration is overwhelming. 5,000 years of darkness, and he wakes to find himself surrounded by enemies, his Dreadnought violated by Xenos hands, and he cannot even cry out in rage. He tries to force his systems online through sheer willpower, but there are safety protocols, activation sequences that must be followed. The Dreadnought was not designed to be activated by its pilot alone. It requires external input, tech marines running startup procedures, sacred oils and prayers to awaken the machine's spirits properly. Outside, the Orks remain blissfully unaware that the Dreadnought is waking up. They continue their examination, arguing about what parts should be removed and what modifications should be made. Rustgut has developed a plan for the Dreadnought's future. He intends to remove the sarcophagus entirely, replacing it with a simple cockpit where an Ork pilot can sit and control the machine. The Dreadnought's weapons will be replaced with bigger, shootier versions. More armor will be welded on. And of course, it will all be painted red, because red ones go faster, even if Dreadnoughts do not normally move very fast. Several of the younger mech boys are already working on sketches for these modifications, drawing crude diagrams that show the Dreadnought covered in additional guns, spiked plates, and various Orky glyphs. They argue about whether to mount a second assault cannon or replace one weapon arm entirely with a massive power claw. They discuss adding a force field generator looted from an Ork stomper that was destroyed months ago. They plan boarding ramps that will allow boys to hitch rides on the Dreadnought's shoulders. The possibilities seem endless, but they need to get inside the sarcophagus first. Rustgut has determined that the locking mechanism is controlled by a complex series of electronic seals that respond to specific code sequences. These codes would normally be known only to the chapter's tech marines, carefully guarded and changed regularly. But the Orks have their own methods. Rustgut begins trying random sequences, literally just pressing buttons and seeing what happens. This should not work. The security systems should lock down completely after too many failed attempts. Should not. But the security systems have been without maintenance for 5,000 years. Circuits have degraded, backup protocols have failed, and when Rustgut, more by luck than design, enters a sequence that happens to match an emergency override code, the sarcophagus unseals with a hiss of escaping gas. The Orks cheer. They have done it. The box is open. Several of them immediately try to peer inside, curious about what an ancient Space Marine Dreadnought sarcophagus contains. What they see makes even Orks pause. The interior of the sarcophagus is filled with cloudy fluid, and suspended in that fluid is something that might have once been human. Cables and tubes connect to what remains of the body. Life support systems continue their patient work, keeping cells alive and brain tissue oxygenated. It is a horror, a preserved nightmare of flesh and machinery fused into something that should not exist. The Orks, however, are not horrified. They are fascinated. One of them pokes the fluid with a stick. Another suggests they pull the whole thing out to get a better look. Rustgut is already thinking about whether any of this biological material could be useful. Painboys sometimes like having spare parts to work with. And inside the sarcophagus, Ethan screams. It is not a sound that anyone can hear, because his vocal cords have long since been severed and replaced with electronic systems. But it is a scream nonetheless, a howl of rage and despair that echoes through his consciousness. The Orks have opened his tomb. They have violated the sanctity of his preservation. And they are treating him, a Space Marine, a warrior of the Emperor, like nothing more than an interesting curiosity. The fury that fills him is incandescent. It burns away the fog of confusion, the lethargy of the long sleep. It focuses his mind with laser precision, and it triggers something deep within the Dreadnought systems. The machine spirits, dormant for so long, respond to their master's rage. They recognize the righteous anger of a loyal servant of the Emperor. They wake. The Dreadnought's reactor surges to full power. Energy floods through systems that have been dark for millennia. Weapon systems come online with the hungry growl of machine spirits eager for war. Servos lock and load. Ammunition feeds cycle, chambering rounds that were manufactured before the current age began. Targeting matrices activate, painting everyone in the workshop with acquisition locks. The Orks notice something is happening. The Dreadnought is making noise now, a deep thrumming that they can feel in their bones. Lights are activating along its chassis. The optical sensors are glowing with an angry red light. Rusgut, who has survived this long by having good instincts for when things are about to get dangerous, takes a step back. The step saves his life. The awakening. The transformation from dormant relic to active war machine takes less than 3 seconds. That is how quickly the Dreadnought's ancient systems respond to Ethan's will. 5,000 years of inactivity, and the mechanisms designed during the Great Crusade snap into readiness as if no time has passed at all. This is the engineering prowess of an age when humanity reached for the stars and found them within grasp. The first system to fully activate is the Dreadnought's Auger Array, a sophisticated sensor suite that provides 360-degree awareness of the battlefield. It immediately identifies 18 life signs in the immediate vicinity, all matching the profile for Orkoid Xenos. Threat assessment algorithms classify them as hostile. Rules of engagement protocols, unchanged since Ethan's last deployment, provide clear guidance. Purge the Xenos with extreme prejudice. The second system is the Vox system. Ethan tries to broadcast on standard Imperial frequencies, attempting to raise any Space Marine forces in the area, any Imperial Guard units, any servants of the Emperor who might provide support or at least acknowledge his awakening. The response is static, the empty hiss of dead channels. There is no one to hear him. He is alone, surrounded by enemies, with no support and no hope of rescue. The third system to activate is the weapons array. The Keres pattern assault cannon mounted on his right arm is a masterpiece of destruction. 6 rotating barrels capable of firing 800 rounds per minute of mass reactive ammunition. The targeting computer interfaces directly with Ethan's neural systems, allowing him to aim with thought speed precision. The ammunition counter shows 900 rounds remaining, loaded 5,000 years ago and patiently waiting to be used. Ethan's left arm bears a Dreadnought-sized power fist, augmented with a built-in storm bolter and equipped with an auxiliary heavy flamer for cleansing entrenched positions. The power field generator spins up, wreathing the massive fist in crackling energy that can pulverize ceramite and crush armor with equal ease. The heavy flamer's promethium tanks register as full. Everything is ready. Everything is functional. He does not hesitate. He does not issue warnings or demand surrender. These are Orks, and Orks deserve only death. His assault cannon begins to spin, the barrels rotating with a rising whine that fills the workshop. The Orks, who have been staring at the Dreadnought with a mixture of confusion and curiosity, suddenly realize that something has gone very wrong. The workshop erupts in a storm of mass reactive destruction. Mass reactive ammunition is designed to penetrate armor before detonating, maximizing damage to the target. Against unarmored or lightly armored opponents like the Orks in the workshop, the effect is catastrophic beyond description. Each round that strikes an Ork body punches through thick green skin and dense muscle tissue before detonating inside, blowing the target apart from within in a spray of blood and bone fragments. The Keres assault cannon fires so rapidly that individual shots become indistinguishable from one another, creating a continuous roar of explosive death that drowns out even the loudest orc war cries. The first 3 orcs die before they can even register surprise. One moment, they are standing near the Dreadnought, pointing at something interesting on its chassis and arguing about it in their crude language, debating whether the shiny bits would make good trophies or better ammunition. The next moment, they simply cease to exist as coherent entities, reduced to component parts scattered across the workshop floor in patterns that speak of tremendous explosive force concentrated in very small spaces. The orcs behind them, who might have survived if they had possessed any sense of self-preservation, instead stare in momentary confusion at where their companions had been standing. They do not survive their confusion. Ethan sweeps his assault cannon in a controlled arc, the targeting computer tracking multiple targets simultaneously with the precision of machinery that has not forgotten how to kill efficiently, and more orcs die in rapid succession. The workshop's metal floor becomes slick with blood and other fluids, making footing treacherous for anyone foolish enough to try running across it. Fragments of orc anatomy decorate the walls and ceiling, painting abstract patterns in red and green that would be almost artistic if they were not so gruesome. Shell casings from the assault cannon pile up around Aethon's feet, still hot from firing, bouncing and rolling across the uneven floor with metallic clinks that provide counterpoint to the thunderous roar of the weapon. To their credit, the orcs do not panic. Panic is not an emotion they readily experience, a gift of their genetic engineering that makes them nearly fearless in the face of almost any threat. Instead, they react with the instinctive violence that defines their species, pivoting from confusion to aggressive action in the span of heartbeats. Those who have weapons begin shooting back immediately, filling the air with the crude bullets of orc shooters and the bright traces of heavy sluggas. The volume of return fire is impressive, if wildly inaccurate. Orc weapons are notorious for their lack of precision, being designed more for volume of fire than actual marksmanship. Bullets ricochet off every surface, creating a storm of lead and sparks that is more dangerous to other orcs than to Ethan. Those without weapons grab whatever is available, showing the resourcefulness that makes orcs so difficult to completely eliminate. Wrenches become clubs, pipes become spears, chunks of scrap metal become thrown projectiles. One particularly inventive orc grabs what appears to be a promethium canister and hurls it at the Dreadnought, presumably hoping it will explode on impact. It does not, instead bouncing harmlessly off Ethan's chest plate and rolling away across the floor. The orc looks disappointed for approximately half a second before an assault cannon burst removes the problem of his disappointment permanently. More orcs charge directly at the Dreadnought, driven by the simple orc philosophy that the best response to any threat is to get close enough to hit it with something heavy. This would be a viable strategy against many opponents. Against a contempt-to-pattern Dreadnought piloted by a warrior with 10,000 years of combat experience, it is suicide. But orcs are not particularly concerned with concepts like survival odds or tactical viability. They see a big metal thing that needs to be bashed, and they charge toward it with the single-minded enthusiasm that characterizes their approach to most problems. Their courage is admirable. Their tactics are not. Orcs' small arms cannot penetrate contempt armor. The bullets spark and ricochet harmlessly off ceramite plates that were designed to withstand anti-tank weapons. The orcs who charge into melee range discover why that is a terrible idea when Aethan's power fist descends like the hammer of an angry god. The first orc to reach him is a knob, larger and tougher than the regular boys, wearing scavenged armor plates and wielding a crude power claw of orc manufacture. He is fast, surprisingly so for something his size, and he manages to dodge the initial swing of Ethan's power fist. But the backswing catches him full in the torso, and the power field does its terrible work. The knob's armor crumples like paper. His body is crushed to pulp. The force of the blow sends his remains flying across the workshop to impact against a wall with wet finality. The auxiliary stormbolter adds its voice to the carnage, pumping bolt rounds into any orc foolish enough to approach from the left side. Each bolt round is a miniature rocket, propelled by a solid fuel charge and armed with a mass-reactive warhead. They blow fist-sized holes through Ork bodies, detonating bone and organ tissue with brutal efficiency. The heavy flamer remains silent for now, Aethan conserving its promethium for when it is truly needed. 15 seconds after the firing began, 12 Orks are dead. The workshop floor is slick with blood and littered with body parts. The surviving Orks are beginning to reconsider their situation. Even for greenskins, this is going badly. Their weapons cannot hurt this thing. Their best fighters are being cut down like vermin, and the Dreadnought shows no signs of slowing down or running out of ammunition. Ruscut Spanner's Masher, the big mech who has survived countless battles through a combination of cunning and good fortune, makes a tactical decision. He grabs the nearest Gretchen and hurls it at the Dreadnought as a distraction, then turns and runs for the workshop exit. Other Orks, seeing their leader retreat, follow suit. In seconds, the workshop is emptying as Orks flee for their lives, trampling slower individuals in their haste to escape. Aethan considers pursuing them, but tactical analysis suggests this would be unwise. The workshop has only one exit, and he would have to navigate through cluttered terrain filled with obstacles. Better to secure his position and assess the situation. He stops firing and watches as the last Ork disappears through the doorway. Silence falls, broken only by the idling hum of his reactor and the soft drip of various fluids from damaged Ork bodies. Aethan stands motionless, running diagnostic checks on his systems. The engagement lasted approximately 45 seconds. He expended 120 rounds of assault cannon ammunition. His Power Fist's energy field showed no degradation. All systems are functioning within acceptable parameters. But where is he? His geographical positioning systems are offline, unable to acquire satellite signals that should be standard across any Imperial world. His communication systems receive nothing but static. His chronometer insists that 5,000 years have passed since his last deployment, but that cannot possibly be correct. Can it? He reviews his memory banks, searching for his last clear recollection: the siege of Talassar Prime, the Chaos invasion, the desperate defense, his Dreadnought taking catastrophic damage and entering emergency stasis. And then nothing. 5,000 years of nothing. His brothers, the Celestial Lions. Where are they? His chapter, his companions, the warriors he fought beside for decades before his internment. Are any of them still alive? After 5,000 years, the answer is almost certainly no. The realization is crushing. He is alone. Everyone he knew is dead. The galaxy he fought to protect has moved on without him. He was forgotten, left behind in the ruins of a battle so old that even the records of it have probably been lost. He is a relic, an ancient thing, as out of place in this age as a man from ancient Terra's history would be in his own time. But he is still a space marine. He is still a servant of the Emperor, and as long as he functions, as long as his consciousness persists and his weapons can fire, he has a duty to perform. The Orks are still here. He can hear them outside, shouting in their crude language, organizing for another assault. They vastly outnumber him. They will likely have heavier weapons now that they know their small arms are ineffective. And he is trapped in this workshop with limited mobility and no support. The tactical situation is poor, but Space Marines have faced poor tactical situations before and emerged victorious. He begins planning his defense, analyzing the workshop's layout and identifying positions that will maximize his firepower while minimizing his exposure. The Orks will come again, and when they do, he will be ready. Outside the workshop, Warboss Scrubnuts is organizing the tribe's response to this unexpected development. The Humi's metal box has woken up and is shooting his boys, which is both surprising and offensive. But it is also, he has to admit, pretty impressive. That kind of firepower is exactly the sort of thing the Rusty Cog tribe could use. They just need to figure out how to get it. Rustgut, nursing a wound where a piece of shrapnel caught his arm during the retreat, proposes several options. They could try to overwhelm the Dreadnought with sheer numbers, sending wave after wave of boys until it runs out of ammunition. They could bring up heavier weapons, the big guns normally mounted on Ork vehicles, and blast it to pieces. Or they could try something clever, like collapsing the workshop on top of it or setting the whole place on fire. Scrubnuts considers these options. The first would work, but it would cost a lot of boys, and while Orks are expendable, losing too many at once is bad for morale. The second might destroy the Dreadnought entirely, which would be wasteful. They want to loot it, not scrap it. The third option has potential, but workshops full of fuel and ammunition have a tendency to explode when set on fire, and the settlement is already too close to the blast radius. He makes a decision. They will lay siege to the workshop, surround it, cut off any escape routes, and wait for the Humie's metal box to run out of power or ammunition or whatever it is that keeps it going. Then, when it is weak, they will swarm it with numbers and take it intact. It is a surprisingly patient strategy for an Ork, but Scrubnuts did not become war boss by being stupid. Sometimes the best way to get what you want is to wait for the right moment. Inside the workshop, Ethan is reaching the same conclusion. He is trapped. The Orks have him surrounded, and while he can hold this position for a considerable time, eventually his ammunition will run out, or his reactor will need maintenance, or something will fail. 5,000 years of neglect, no matter how good the engineering, leaves vulnerabilities. He needs to break out, find a defensible position, and determine what has happened to the Imperium's presence on this world. But first, he needs to deal with the immediate threat. The Orks will attack again, probably soon, and when they do, he will teach them the price of defiling a Space Marine Dreadnought. The siege and the breaking of the Green Tide. The Orks return in force 20 minutes later. This time they are prepared. Rustgut has organized them into mobs, each with a specific objective. The first mob, expendable boys with basic weapons, will charge the workshop entrance to draw the Dreadnought's fire. The second mob, carrying looted Imperial Guard weapons and a few Ork heavy guns, will provide covering fire. The third mob, led by Rustgut himself and including the tribe's best mech boys, will attempt to circle around and access the workshop through a side entrance that they hastily smash through the wall. It is, by Ork standards, a sophisticated plan. Under other circumstances, it might even work. But they are facing a Space Marine who fought during the Great Crusade, who learned tactics from commanders who walked with the Emperor, and who has personal experience dating back 10,000 years. Ethan has been listening to them organize through his external audio sensors. He knows what they are planning, and he has prepared accordingly. When the first mob charges through the workshop entrance, screaming their war cries and firing wildly, they do not find Ethan waiting at the back of the chamber where they left him. He has relocated to a position that provides maximum fields of fire while offering some cover from return fire. More importantly, he has rigged several surprises using materials available in the workshop. The first Ork through the door triggers a tripwire connected to several barrels of promethium that Ethan found stored in a corner. The explosion is immediate and devastating, turning the entrance into an inferno and immolating the first dozen Orks instantly. Those behind them stumble to a halt, temporarily blinded and disoriented by the flash and the heat. They are perfect targets. Ethan's assault cannon speaks again, and Orks begin dying. He fires in controlled bursts now, conserving ammunition while maintaining effective suppression. Each burst takes down 2 or 3 Orks, the mass reactive rounds punching through bodies and detonating in spectacular fashion. The Orks, caught in the bottleneck of the entrance and blinded by smoke and flames, cannot effectively return fire. They try to retreat, but more Orks are pushing forward from behind, creating a crushing press of bodies that only makes them easier targets. The second mob, providing covering fire from outside, finds themselves ineffective. Their bullets spark off the walls and ceiling of the workshop, doing nothing to suppress the Dreadnought that they cannot even see through the smoke and fire. They hear the assault cannon's distinctive roar. They see Orks flying backward out of the entrance in pieces, but they cannot acquire a clear target. Rustgut's flanking maneuver fares better initially, His mech boys blast through the workshop's side wall using a demolition charge, creating a new entrance that bypasses the kill zone at the main door. They pour through, expecting to catch the Dreadnought from the side and overwhelm it with heavy weapons before it can respond. What they find instead is that Ethan has anticipated this as well. He has positioned himself so that he has clear sight lines to both entrances. As the mech boys come through their newly created hole in the wall, they are greeted by a burst of stormbolter fire that kills 3 of them instantly. The survivors scatter, diving behind whatever cover they can find, and begin returning fire with their own heavy weapons. Now Aethon is engaged on 2 fronts, splitting his attention between the main entrance where Orks continue to push forward despite horrific casualties, and the side entrance where Rustgut's mech boys are employing heavier firepower. A rocket launcher fires, the crude rocket spiraling through the air and detonating against Aethon's right pauldron. The explosion rocks the Dreadnought but fails to penetrate the Contemptor's armor. Ethan responds with his heavy flamer, sweeping a gout of burning promethium across the side entrance and forcing the mech boys to retreat. The battle has now been raging for 2 minutes. The workshop is filled with smoke and the screaming of dying Orks. Bodies are piled at the main entrance 3 deep, creating a macabre barricade that the surviving Orks are trying to scramble over. Ethan's ammunition counter shows he has expended 400 rounds of assault cannon ammunition. His power fist has crushed 2 Orks who got close enough to engage in melee, their bodies now decorating the workshop floor. His heavy flamer has consumed 30% of its promethium reserves. Outside, Warboss Scrubnuts is watching the assault fall apart and making calculations. They have lost somewhere between 40 and 50 boys already, with more being wounded or killed every few seconds. The Humi's metal box shows no signs of weakening. His plan to overwhelm it with numbers is not working. The Dreadnought is simply too well positioned, too heavily armed, and too well armored for their current tactics to succeed. He needs to change approach. But before he can issue new orders, something unexpected happens. One of the weird boys attached to the tribe, a particularly unstable specimen named Zapskull, has been absorbing the WAG energy generated by all the fighting and dying. The psychic pressure has been building inside his skull, and it has reached critical mass. Zapskull's eyes begin glowing green. Energy crackles around his head. He points at the workshop and screams words in a language that predates the current Orc civilization. The WAG! Energy gathered from hundreds of Orks focuses through him like a lens, and he unleashes it in a directed blast that tears through the workshop wall. Like it is made of paper, the psychic shockwave hits Ethan's Dreadnought with the force of an artillery shell. His systems register a massive energy surge. Electromagnetic interference scrambles his sensors. The Dreadnought staggers, servos screaming as they fight to keep him upright. For a moment, his vision goes dark, systems overloading and rebooting. When his optical sensors come back online 2 seconds later, he finds Orks pouring through the breach that the weird boy created. 2 seconds is a long time in combat. It is long enough for a dozen Orks to close to melee range. It is long enough for them to swarm over him, clambering onto his chassis and trying to find weak points in his armor. It is long enough for one particularly bold knob to reach his assault cannon and attempt to jam a crude bomb into the barrel. Ethan reacts with the precision of a warrior who has fought for 10,000 years. His assault cannon cannot be brought to bear on enemies this close, so he uses his power fist. He swats Orks off his chassis like they are insects, each impact sending bodies flying. The knob with the bomb dies when Ethan's power fist closes around him, crushing the greenskin and his explosive charge together. The resulting detonation damages the assault cannon's outermost barrel, but the weapon remains functional. More Orks are coming. Ethan can see them through the smoke, a green tide that seems endless. His tactical analysis systems are painting threat markers across his vision faster than he can eliminate them. He is being overwhelmed. This is not a sustainable position. He makes a decision. If he remains here, the Orks will eventually drag him down through sheer numbers. He needs mobility, he needs room to maneuver, he He needs to break out of this trap. Ethan activates his Dreadnought's full locomotive power and charges toward the main entrance, deciding that remaining stationary is no longer viable. If he stays in this workshop, the Orks will eventually drag him down through sheer numbers and persistent close combat. He needs mobility. He needs room to maneuver and utilize the full range of his weapon systems. He needs to break out of this trap before the structural damage to the building itself creates additional problems. The Orks in his path see tons of adamantium and ceramite bearing down on them like an avalanche given form and purpose. Some try to dodge, others try to brace themselves against the charge. A few, demonstrating either remarkable courage or remarkable stupidity, attempt to tackle the Dreadnought directly. None of these approaches work. Ethan plows through them like they are not even there, crushing Orks beneath his massive feet, the servo-assisted joints of his legs providing more than enough force to shatter bone and pulverize flesh. The sound of breaking bodies accompanies his charge, a wet crunching that speaks of organic matter failing catastrophically when meeting forces it was never designed to withstand. His power, fist sweeps in wide arcs before him, clearing space like a farmer scything wheat at harvest time. Each swing is calculated, precise, designed to eliminate multiple targets with maximum efficiency. An Ork caught by the backswing of the power fist is not just killed, but obliterated, the power field disrupting molecular bonds at the point of contact and the kinetic force doing the rest. Bodies, or pieces of them, fly backward to impact against walls and other Orks with bone-breaking force. One unfortunate greenskin is swatted so hard he actually embeds in the workshop's wall, creating a crude Ork-shaped indentation in the metal surface before sliding down to leave a smeared trail. His assault cannon fires on full automatic now, conservation of ammunition momentarily less important than establishing a path to freedom. The remaining 5 barrels spit death in every direction that his targeting computer identifies as containing threats. The machine spirit of the assault cannon is awake and eager, its hunger for destruction matching its master's determination to escape. Spent shell casings pour from the weapon like brass rain, creating a literal waterfall of hot metal that bounces and skitters across the floor. The sound is deafening, a percussion performance of violence that drowns out everything except the screaming of dying Orks and the bellowing of those still trying to fight. The Orks at the entrance see death approaching with inexorable purpose and try to scatter, their survival instincts finally overcoming their enthusiasm for combat. But there is nowhere to go. The entrance is crowded with bodies, both living and dead. Those in front cannot retreat because of those pressing forward from behind. Those behind cannot see what is happening in front and continue to push forward, eager to join the fight. The result is a crushing press of green flesh that makes them perfect targets. Ethan explodes through the doorway in a shower of debris and dismembered Ork parts. The doorframe itself, designed to accommodate vehicles and large equipment, is still too small for a charging Dreadnought moving at full speed. The ceramite shoulders of his chassis impact the frame's edges and simply tear them away, bringing chunks of wall with them. Metal screams as it deforms. Structural supports groan under stress they were never meant to bear. And in the middle of it all, Ethan emerges into the open like a vengeful god, stepping forth from a temple dedicated to war. Outside, he finds himself in an open area surrounded by dozens of crude Ork structures. And surrounding those structures, staring at him with a mixture of surprise and delight, are hundreds of Orks. Warboss Scrubnuts sees the Dreadnought burst free from the workshop and grins. Now this is proper fighting. The Humie's metal box is in the open where his boys can get at it properly. He raises his power claw and bellows a command that needs no translation. Wag! The response is immediate and deafening. Hundreds of Ork voices take up the cry. The wag! Energy that has been building throughout the battle surges to new heights. The Orks charge as a unified mass, a green tide of muscle and violence that crashes toward Ethan from all directions. Ethan plants his feet and opens fire. His assault cannon sweeps in controlled arcs, laying down overlapping fields of fire that cut through the charging orcs like a harvester through wheat. Every burst kills multiple targets. Every swing of his power fist crushes orcs to pulp. His heavy flamer bathes entire sections of the battlefield in cleansing fire, turning orcs into living torches that run screaming until they collapse. But there are so many. For every orc he kills, 2 more take its place. They are climbing over their own dead to reach him, using the bodies of their fallen comrades as cover. Rocket launches fire from multiple angles, and while Ethan's armor holds, each impact rocks his frame and drains his capacitor reserves. Big shooters chatter constantly, their bullets whining off his armor in showers of sparks. Then the heavier weapons arrive. An Ork Death Dread, a crude mockery of an Imperial Dreadnought, controlled by a half-mad Gretchen pilot, stomps into view. It is covered in spikes and painted a garish combination of red and yellow, and it mounts a collection of weapons that would be comical if they were not so dangerous. The Death Dread opens fire with everything it has, and Ethan is forced to divert attention from the boys to deal with this new threat. His assault cannon targets the Death Dread's center mass and fires a sustained burst. Mass reactive rounds detonate against the crude armor plating, blowing chunks of metal away and exposing the internal mechanisms. But the Death Dread is surprisingly tough, held together as much by orc belief as by actual engineering. It returns fire with its own collection of big shooters and a single rocket launcher, forcing Ethan to dodge behind a building for cover. This is the moment the orcs have been waiting for. While Ethan is dealing with the Death Dread, a mob of knobs, led by Warboss Scrubnuts himself, charges in from the side. These are the tribe's elite fighters, larger and tougher than regular boys, equipped with power claws and boss poles and the absolute confidence that comes from winning countless fights through sheer brutality. Ethan detects them a second before they hit his flank, but a second is not enough time to fully react. Scrubnuts' power claw slams into the join between Ethan's leg and hip assembly, and even Contemptor armor has weak points. The power field disrupts the molecular bonds holding the armor plates together, and the claw's mechanical jaws close with crushing force. Hydraulic fluid begins leaking from the damaged joint. Ethan pivots despite the damage, bringing his power fist around in a backhand swing that catches Scrubnuts in the chest. The warboss is thrown backward, his armor crumpled and his chest crushed, but he is not dead. Orcs are tough. Ethan follows up with a burst from his Stormbolter, and finally, the warboss stops moving. But the other knobs are on him now, attacking from multiple angles. Power claws hammer at his armor, looking for weak points. One knob manages to climb onto his back and starts trying to pry open his sarcophagus with a crude cutting tool. Ethan spins and fires his heavy flamer directly upward, bathing his own back in flames to burn off the attacker. The knob screams and falls away, but not before his cutting tool scores a deep gouge in the sarcophagus armor. Ethan's ammunition counter shows he has 300 rounds remaining. His power reserves are at 60%. His hydraulic systems are damaged in 3 locations. His left knee servo is running 20% below optimal efficiency, and there are still dozens, perhaps hundreds of orcs surrounding him, with more arriving every minute as the sounds of battle draw in orcs from across the settlement. This is not a winnable fight. The tactical analysis is clear. He cannot defeat this many enemies alone. He needs to withdraw, find a defensive position, and wait for reinforcements. But where would he go? And who would send reinforcements to a world that the Imperium apparently abandoned millennia ago? The answer comes in an unexpected form. In the distance beyond the Orc settlement, Ethan's auger array detects a signature. It is faint, intermittent, but unmistakable. An Imperial transponder beacon, the kind used to mark landing zones and rally points. Someone else is on this world, someone with Imperial technology. Hope, a sensation Ethan has not felt in so long he barely recognizes it, flares within his consciousness. If there is an Imperial presence on Talassar Prime, then he is not alone. He must reach them. he must make contact. Everything else is secondary. He activates his Dreadnought's full combat mode, pushing systems beyond their normal operational limits. Power consumption spikes. Heat warnings flash across his vision, but his movement speed increases by 30%. He lowers his assault cannon and begins walking toward the signal, firing continuously to clear a path through the Orks. They try to stop him. They throw themselves at his legs, trying to trip him. They fire everything they have, desperate to bring down this implacable enemy who will not die, no matter how much punishment they inflict. But Ethan is a venerable dreadnought of the Adeptus Astartes, and he has fought in battles that make this skirmish look like a bar fight. He walks through them like a god of war, crushing orcs beneath his feet, blasting them apart with his weapons, burning them with his flamer. Every step takes him closer to that distant signal. Every orc that falls is one less obstacle between him and potential salvation. He walks, and the orcs die, and the settlement begins to burn as his heavy flamer ignites structures and fuel stores. Behind him, the Rusty Cog tribe watches, their prize walking away. They have lost their war boss. They have lost scores of boys, and they are losing the most impressive piece of loot they have ever found. Some of them want to give chase, to continue the fight until either they die or the dreadnought falls. But others, seeing the trail of destruction Ethan has carved through their settlement, decide that maybe this particular piece of loot is not worth the cost. The pursuit falters. The orcs let him go, turning their attention instead to fighting amongst themselves over who should be the next war boss, and whether they should rebuild the workshop or use the materials to make more wagons. It is the orc way. Yesterday's enemy becomes today's forgotten problem as soon as something more immediate demands their attention. Ethan walks through the ruins of Talassar Prime, following the signal that promises contact with the Imperium he has served for so long. Behind him, the orc settlement burns. Before him, the unknown future awaits. He does not know what he will find when he reaches that signal. He does not know if the Imperium he knew still exists, or if it has changed beyond recognition. He does not know if there is a place for ancient warriors like him in whatever age this has become. But he knows his duty, and that, at least, has not changed in 5,000 years. He is a space marine. He serves the Emperor, and as long as his reactor beats and his weapons can fire, he will continue that service, no matter what the galaxy has become. The ancient dreadnought walks on through the ruins, a relic of a forgotten age, carrying within him memories of battles that have passed into legend, and the unwavering conviction that some things, some oaths, are truly eternal. Aftermath and implications. 3 days later, after following the signal through ruins and wastelands, navigating around orc patrols and avoiding the territories of the various warring tribes that control different sections of Talassar Prime, Ethan makes contact with the source of the Imperial signal. It is not what he expected. It is not a full Imperial Guard regiment staging for planetary reclamation. It is not a Space Marine strike force investigating rumors of heresy. It is not even a properly equipped Mechanicus Forge complex, with all the resources necessary to provide comprehensive maintenance. It is a small Mechanicus research expedition, numbering barely a dozen tech priests and perhaps 30 servitor retinues, investigating the ruins of Talassar Prime for archaeotech, lost standard template constructs, and any fragments of knowledge that might have survived the millennia since the planet's abandonment. They are part of a broader effort, spanning centuries and involving hundreds of such expeditions, to reclaim technology from worlds abandoned during various catastrophes throughout Imperial history. The age of apostasy left countless worlds depopulated or destroyed, their knowledge lost when their populations died or fled. Reclaiming even fragments of that lost knowledge has become a priority for certain factions within the Mechanicus. The expedition has established a small encampment in what was once an administratum complex, its thick walls providing some shelter from the elements and the occasional orc scouting party. Servitors patrol the perimeter, their programming simple but effective. Tech priests work inside portable laboratories, examining artifacts pulled from the ruins and cataloging everything according to protocols that date back to the founding of the Mechanicus itself. It is a small operation, the kind that happens on thousands of forgotten worlds throughout the Imperium, usually resulting in minimal discoveries, but occasionally uncovering something significant enough to justify the expense and risk. When the tech priest's sensors detect the approaching Dreadnought, their initial response is alarm bordering on panic. Their auger arrays identify a large bipedal war machine approaching from the ruins, its reactor signature indicating active power systems, its weapons reading as armed and potentially dangerous. The silhouette matches profiles for both Imperial Dreadnoughts and Ork Def Dreads, and given that they know Orks infest this world, they reasonably assume the worst. Servitors are ordered to defensive positions. What few defensive weapons the expedition possesses are activated and aimed toward the approaching contact. Several tech priests begin emergency shutdown procedures on sensitive equipment, preparing to evacuate if necessary. But when Ethan broadcasts his identification codes on standard Imperial frequencies, everything changes. The codes are old, incredibly old, predating most modern encryption schemas by millennia. But they are authentic, verified against records that the Mechanicus maintains in their deepest archives. More importantly, they identify the Dreadnought as belonging to the Celestial Lions chapter, providing not just a chapter designation, but specific serial numbers that allow the tech priest to trace the war machine's history back through 10,000 years of carefully maintained records. The reaction shifts from alarm to shock, then quickly to excitement. A Contemptor pattern Dreadnought, operational and crewed by an active pilot, is not just a rare find. It is a discovery that could justify a dozen expeditions of this size, possibly more. The Contemptor pattern represents technology from the Great Crusade, an age when the Imperium's technical capabilities vastly exceeded what currently exists. Most Contemptors still in service are jealously guarded by their chapters, maintained at tremendous expense, and rarely risked in combat because they are irreplaceable. Finding one that has been lost for 5 millennia, preserved by ancient stasis fields, potentially containing data and design specifications that have been lost to the ravages of time, is the kind of discovery that Magi dream about. But that the Dreadnought contains a space marine who actually fought during the Emperor's time, who potentially possesses first-hand memories of the Great Crusade, who might be able to provide testimony about events that historians have been debating for 10,000 years, is nothing short of miraculous. The theological implications alone are staggering. This is a warrior who served when the Emperor still walked among humanity, when the Primarchs led their legions, when the Imperium was united in purpose and advancing across the galaxy with unstoppable momentum. The knowledge contained in his memory banks could reshape understanding of that era. The lead Magos, a venerable tech priest designated Xerxes 9 Delta, who has served the machine god for 3 centuries and overseen dozens of archaeological expeditions, personally performs the sacred rites to verify Aethon's authenticity. The process is extensive, involving not just code verification, but physical examination of the Dreadnought's components, metallurgical analysis of the alloys used in its construction, and careful comparison of design elements against archived schematics from the Great Crusade era. Every measurement confirms what the identification codes claimed. This is genuinely a Contemptor from that legendary age, and the warrior within is genuine as well. The identification codes check out against multiple verification protocols. The Dreadnought's serial numbers match records from the Celestial Lions chapter's founding, records so old they exist only in the most ancient archives, written in High Gothic variants that have not been in common use for millennia. And when Xerxes 9 Delta carefully interfaces with Ethan's memory banks, following protocols designed to avoid damaging the delicate neural pathways or corrupting the stored data, they find fragmentary battle logs that provide first-hand accounts of campaigns that historians have been debating for millennia. Reports of battles on worlds whose very names have been forgotten. Tactical assessments of enemies that no longer exist. Observations about primarchs and legendary figures that could only come from someone who actually knew them personally. Xerxes 9 Delta immediately sends an astropathic message to Mars, to the Fabricator General himself, reporting the discovery in detail. The message is given priority coding, routed through the most reliable astropathic channels available. Such a discovery must be reported to the highest levels of Mechanicus leadership. After all, this could have implications for everything from technical research to theological doctrine. A living link to the age when the Omnissiah walked among humanity is not just valuable, it is sacred. The response, when it comes several weeks later, is explicit. The Dreadnought and its pilot are to be recovered and transported to Mars for study and preservation. The knowledge contained within Ethan's memory banks could be invaluable. His Contemptor pattern chassis represents technology that the Mechanicus would very much like to understand better. He is, in every sense, a treasure. But Ethan has other ideas. During the time it takes for the message to reach Mars and the response to return, he speaks with Xerxes 9 Delta about the current state of the Imperium. He learns about the 10,000 years of history he has missed, the loss of the Primarchs, the countless wars and Xeno's invasions, the slow degradation of technology and knowledge, the rise of the imperial cult, the countless threats that assail humanity from all sides. He also learns that the celestial lions still exist, though they were nearly destroyed during what is now called the Third War for Armageddon. The chapter has been rebuilt with assistance from other successor chapters, but they are a shadow of their former strength. They currently operate from a new fortress monastery on a different world, their original home lost during the Age of Apostasy, along with Talisar Prime. When Ethan requests that he be returned to his chapter rather than sent to Mars, Xerxes 9 Delta explains that this may not be possible. The Mechanicus has claimed salvage rights to him based on standard recovery protocols. He is technically Archaeotech now, a recovered relic that belongs to the Adeptus Mechanicus. The chapter can petition for his return, but such negotiations could take decades. Ethan's response is quiet but firm. He is not Archaeotech. He is not a relic to be studied. He is a space marine, a warrior of the Adeptus Astartes, and his place is with his chapter. If the Mechanicus attempts to prevent him from reaching his brothers, he will consider them hostile and act accordingly. The threat is delivered without anger, simply as a statement of fact. Xerxes 9 Delta, who has been a Magos for 300 years and has dealt with difficult situations before, recognizes that this is not a fight worth having. A functioning Contemptor. Dreadnought with an active pilot is an extremely dangerous opponent. More importantly, antagonizing one of the Emperor's space marines over a bureaucratic dispute would be theologically problematic and politically unwise. A compromise is reached. Ethan will allow the Mechanicus to perform non-invasive scans and data extraction from his systems, providing them with technical schematics and memory logs that could prove invaluable. In exchange, they will arrange for his transport to the Celestial Lion's current fortress monastery and provide the resources necessary to properly maintain and repair his ancient chassis. 6 months later, Ethan stands in the Hall of Remembrance of the Celestial Lions, surrounded by space marines who would be his distant descendants if such a term applied to chapters. They treat him with reverence and awe, this ancient warrior who fought when their Primarch still lived, who remembers battles from the Great Crusade, who has slept through most of their chapter's history and awakened to find himself in an age he does not recognize. The chapter master, a warrior named Ekene, welcomes him formally and pledges that the Celestial Lions will honor his service and provide him with everything he needs to continue his duty. Tech Marines immediately begin the process of restoring his Dreadnought to full operational capacity, replacing damaged components and performing maintenance that is 5,000 years overdue. Chaplains spend hours in conversation with him, recording his memories and integrating them into the chapter's oral history. But Ethan finds it difficult to connect with these young warriors. To them, he is a legendary figure, a hero from a distant age when the Imperium was still strong and the Primarchs walked among men. To him, they are strangers, well-meaning and respectful, but ultimately, people he has no shared history with. Everyone he knew is dead. The galaxy he fought for has changed beyond recognition, and he is left wondering what his purpose is in this new age. The answer comes during the Celestial Lion's next deployment. An Ork, whack, is threatening an Imperial hive world, and the chapter commits 2 full companies to its defense. Ekeen asks if Ethan wishes to join the assault, or if he would prefer to remain in the fortress monastery, serving as a keeper of knowledge and advisor to younger brothers. Ethan's response is immediate. He is a warrior. His place is on the battlefield. The fact that he does not recognize this age, that he feels like a ghost haunting a galaxy that has moved on without him, does not change his fundamental nature. He serves the Emperor. He fights his enemies, and as long as his Dreadnought functions, he will continue to do so. So Brother Captain Ethan, Ancient of the Celestial Lions, goes to war once more. And when the Orks see him stride onto the battlefield, weapons hot and ready, they feel a moment of recognition. This is the metal Humi that killed so many of their tribe brothers. This is the walking war machine that burned their settlement and walked through them like they were nothing. Some of them run, but most of them charge, because Orks are Orks, and the promise of a good fight always outweighs the risk of death. And Ethan meets them with the same cold fury he has brought to every battle for 10,000 years. The Orks on Talassar Prime never did manage to successfully loot a Dreadnought. The Rusty Cog tribe eventually collapsed into infighting and scattered into smaller warbands. A few decades after Ethan's departure, an inquisitorial task force performed exterminatus on the planet, sterilizing it completely to prevent the Ork infestation from spreading. Talassar Prime became a dead rock, circling its sun in silence, all traces of its history erased. But the story of what happened there, of ancient warrior who slept for 5,000 years and awakened to face impossible odds alone, has become legend within the Celestial Lions chapter. Young Space Marines are told about Brother Captain Aethon, who served during the Great Crusade, who slept through the age of apostasy, and who returned to fight in an age he does not recognize because duty demands it. It is a cautionary tale about the price of service. It is an inspirational story about unwavering dedication. It is a reminder that some oaths transcend time itself, and that the Emperor's Space Marines do not retire, do not surrender, and do not abandon their posts no matter what the galaxy throws at them. Conclusion. The question of what happens when Orks find a Dreadnought that has been asleep for 5,000 years is answered not with a simple outcome, but with a sequence of events that reveals fundamental truths about both species. For the Orks, it demonstrated that not everything can be looted successfully. Some things are too dangerous, too powerful, too fundamentally alien to their nature to be tamed and repurposed. The Dreadnought was not just a machine to be stripped for parts. It was a warrior. And when that warrior woke, he reminded the Greenskins that humanity, even in its diminished state, can still produce weapons that make the galaxy tremble. For Ethan, awakening to find the Imperium changed beyond recognition, his brothers dead, and his world forgotten, could have been a moment of despair. Instead, it became an affirmation of his purpose. The details of the galaxy may have changed, but the fundamental truth remains. Humanity still faces enemies. The Emperor's servants are still needed. And duty, that most sacred of obligations, endures across any span of time. The encounter on Talassar Prime was not a glorious victory recorded in the histories. It was a desperate fight for survival between a lone space marine and an Ork tribe that made the mistake of disturbing his rest. But it represents something important about the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The past is always present, buried beneath the ruins of failed civilizations and forgotten wars, waiting for the moment when it will rise again to shape the future. Dreadnoughts are walking tombs, yes, but they are also living testaments to the fact that some warriors refuse to be buried, some oaths refuse to be broken, and some duties continue long past the point where anyone remembers why they began. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and in that war, even the dead do not rest. They wait in darkness, dreaming of battles yet to come, ready to wake when duty calls. 5,000 years is a long sleep. But for a space marine encased in adamantium and ceramite, sworn to eternal service to the Emperor of mankind, it is merely time enough to rest before the next war begins. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Warhammer 40,000 lore, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are countless stories in the grim darkness of the far future, tales of heroes and villains, of victories and defeats, of hope and despair. We will continue exploring them, one narrative at a time, uncovering the histories that make this universe so rich and compelling. Thank you for watching, and may the Emperor protect you in all your endeavors.